Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom, and in this video we're going to look at something very, very interesting. So, in this little DVD case, and I got it from my public library, is a mini-series called Food Delicious Science. This is from the PBS. It's also, I believe it was filmed for the BBC, so that's the British Broadcasting Company. So, there are 3 different shows in this. So, the first one is Food on the Brain. What that video talks about is you have 2 scientists who are talking about how food affects our brains, essentially, how we understand different things. It talks, I believe, chocolate is a big thing in this. And one of the things I learned from watching this, because it's very, very interesting, they look at the chemistry and how our brains perceive food and how we work with, not actually the senses is the next one, but how we mentally perceive food. Specifically, one of the things that I found very interesting in this video has to do with sweets. Now, I'm filming this in December, as opposed to much of what else you're watching going on this month, which was mostly, with the exception of 1 or 2 things, filmed last summer. So this is sweet season. But the very, very interesting thing is the majority of the sweets that we have, including things like milk, chocolate, and cookies, contain 50% fat, 50% sugar. That occurs in one place and one place only in nature: breast milk. So that kind of explains why the heck we crave this, is because it has that ratio of fat to sugar that was originally the building blocks of our life when we were babies. So formula probably contains that same 50-50%. Because that's along with a bunch of other stuff. And of course, that's what breast milk does. And there's a heck of a lot of other stuff in there. But the primary part is 50% sugar, 50% fat, which is what we need for energy and for building blocks. It also contains protein. That was one of the very interesting things. It looks at chocolate production in Peru. It talks about a couple different other things. It's very, very interesting because it talks about how our brains perceive different foods, how we not only taste things, but we also, we eat with our eyes and we eat with our nose as well. So, and that's, I think, one of the things he talks about when they're smelling foods. I could be wrong. There are 3 of these things. But it is very, very interesting. The next one is, and I'm mixing these 2 up probably, is A Matter of Taste. Literally, that's what this talks about. I have a cat in my lap here. So this talks about our taste buds and how our tongues perceive different foods. Again, they talk about chocolate. They talk about how we as humans have evolved to determine what's food and what's not. One of the main interesting things is, again, back in Peru here. The first 2 videos spent quite a bit of time in Peru because there's a lot of food in Peru. But it talks about how the Inca developed the potato. Yes, for those of you who are not realizing what I just say, the Inca in Peru developed the potato. That is where potatoes come from. They're not from Ireland, they're not from Europe, they're from basically the Andes Mountains of Peru, and they were developed by the Inca. And in this way, they pretty much bred the poison out of them. Yeah. Potatoes are part of the deadly nightshade family. Strangely enough, I believe so are tomatoes. So, in their natural state, they're going to kill you. But the Inca basically bred them to the point where you have hundreds of varieties and they're not going to kill you. However, one of the interesting things is he talked to people who were living way out there, and the frost can destroy these plants. Now, there is a specific very hardy plant, however, of potato that is still poisonous. But what they can do is, after they pick it, they take it up further in the mountains, leave it out, let it freeze, come back the next day, if they're rock solid, break the skins off, and because it's broken, the ice crystals have broken the cells within this potato plant, and by breaking the skin and then allowing it to defrost, essentially the poison is leached out and they're edible. And this is how these specific people protect themselves in case the frost destroys a regular crop of potatoes. Because potatoes, as much as they've been demonized by various health groups, well, they're a great source of vitamins, minerals, proteins, and fats, I believe. So people survive off them. You know, there's a reason there was a bloody potato famine in Ireland. They were actually surviving off these things. Unfortunately, that issue, they believed they were surviving off one specific type, and when a blight hit one, it hit everything and everybody died. Not going into the history of the potato famine, but potatoes originally come from Peru. So, and that was an interesting thing. There was a couple other interesting things. It was basically they talked about various ways of our tongue and how we taste different things. One of the other things was they talked about how meat, when cooking, the flavor and the proteins change. So we obviously, most people aren't going to, you don't eat a lot of raw meat. I mean, you do, but most people are eating their meat cooked. So that transforms. I believe it's the Maillard reaction. It's what happens when we cook food. So it talks about the science of that. It talks about how certain stinky cheeses, and this was a new thing for me, when we eat them, because we're now smelling them from the inside, and our brains are contemplating also what it's feeling on the tongue, it changes it. So why a stinky cheese may smell, once you put it into mouth, it can still taste good because you're smelling it differently, because you're smelling it from the inside, and you're smelling it differently. So it's very, very interesting. So that's what that goes over, along with umami and why on earth we're attracted to different tastes, like sweet and fat and different things. It doesn't actually talk about sour all that much. It talks about bitter. It talks about umami. It talks about sweet. Doesn't really talk about sour all that much, but it's still very, very interesting video. So the last one is we are what we eat. So this thing talks about, and this is what I just finished watching, because I watched them one day after the other, is the building blocks of light. It talks about calcium and protein and fats and carbohydrates specifically. In fact, it starts talking about carbohydrates in rice and how when we cook it, we're able to break that down, and it provides us with sugar, essentially complex sugars. Again, demonized by carbs are not bad for you. They're an energy kick. We need them to, function. So they're not evil. They don't make you fat. Trust me. The science is there. So, but then it also talks about proteins and specific amino acids that we need, that we can particularly, and we hear these constantly. One is 6, one is 3. So, and we do not get enough 3. That's the biggest problem, because our beef and our other meats are no longer grass-fed, which is where they would get that amino acid. So that I cannot think of it off the top of my head. It's almost 8 o'clock at night, and I have a 2-year-old. My brain doesn't always work, but it's that we cannot produce this. The specific amino acid that has a 3 attached to it. The other one, of course, has a 6. We cannot produce them. So we do not get enough of the 3. It's primarily found in oily fish, grass-fed beef. I can't remember what other thing. Probably certain beans. So it's vital to the building block of life. We get way too much of 6 because it's found everywhere. So it's vital that you get those 3, and you have to keep them in balance. And it talks about how lack of this specific amino acid and the imbalances lead to depression and type 2 diabetes. Essentially, the 6 is found in vegetable oil that we cook all sorts of things in. So we get way too much of it, particularly in the United States. It also talks about calcium, and that's the last part of it. It talks about they go up to Belgium, up in the mountains, where they have a specific group of people that are extremely long-lived. And it has to do with they're able to consume calcium from, again, grass-fed cows and natural. Even though they technically cannot digest milk. And it talks about how the vast majority of African Americans and Asian Americans, because they're not cow breeding cultures, their people did not grow up breeding and consuming milk, possibly even cheeses. By the time they're about 5, they've lost the ability to digest it. These people, using a specific, hintedly yesterday's yogurt, create yogurt, which has a specific bacteria that breaks down the lactose and makes it easier to digest. The other thing they do, and that's to do with, we're talking about minerals, and we need a certain small amount of them, vitamin D. Now, mostly vitamin D we get from sunlight. However, if you live in the northern hemisphere or up in the mountains, you don't get a lot of sun year-round. So what they do is they found it in mushrooms. So you take mushrooms out and you let them spend a couple hours in the sun. They produce enough vitamin D to help replace what you need normally that you would get from the sun. So that's one of the other things I talk about. That's important. We need various minerals. We need iron, which we get from a variety of things. Iron. Beans, meat, leafy green vegetables. It talks about getting vitamin K from dark vegetables. So it's a very interesting video. All 3 of them talk about the needs we have for different foods and how there's the science behind food. So it's very, very interesting. Extremely educational. A great thing to have in your repertoire, particularly homeschoolers, when you're looking at food, if you have kids who are at elementary age and they don't want to eat a wide variety of food, this might help. It's like, this is why. There's a reason I'm trying to get you to eat your leafy green vegetables, or I'm trying to get you to eat these beans, or drink milk, or eat a variety of things. Mind you, it also will encourage them to eat chocolate. Not always a bad thing, but not that much. But still, it helps them understand the meaning behind why we need certain foods. And it's very, very interesting. To someone like me who absolutely loves cooking, I'm at home in my kitchen. So it's very interesting. It also talks about the creation of, again, carbohydrates, bread. So how rice is in one, wheat is in another culture, particularly Western, and how we grind it down and make bread, which again is vital. It also talks about a very interesting thing of this moldy corn that's prized in Mexico and considered a blight everywhere else, and how it helps this fungus, along with the regular corn, essentially is a solid food source. It gives you everything you need to survive. So it was very interesting. So that's really it for this video. I highly recommend this. So if you like what you see, be sure to check out the rest of the channel. All of January, besides me finishing off a book series, The Rachel's Apprentice, is going on. It would have started in December, which is when this is being filmed. I'm like days away from Christmas here. So food is on the mind. But January has a lot of food holidays if you look on various calendars, so I chose to do a lot of food. And I'm doing this video in place of a food vlog, which I decided to, at the last minute, to ditch. So along with a few other YouTube videos. So be sure to check those out. January is full of food. February is both Asian and African American. I did a bunch of videos on that. Some of it's kids stuff. I'm also covering both the Joy Luck Club and the Color Purple in there. So I do get into more serious topics specifically for teens. We are a secular homeschooling family, though my daughter is very, very young. By the time you see this, she won't be much older, surprisingly. I'm also filming a stuff that's going on for 2023 right now. But she'll be 2.5, right around the end of January, early February. So we are getting to the homeschooling stuff. I will add that as she gets older. That will be definitely coming this summer. She hits 3 in the close end, middle of summer. So I will start adding more educational stuff then and more homeschooling secular reviews as we move forward. I also do a bunch of videos. I mean, this is an educational thing. I do fictional stuff as well. For next year, I have Coraline sitting here. Yes, I'm covering the book as well, but I'm waiting for it. It's at the library. So, and along with a bunch of other stuff. So I do fun stuff. I do some serious stuff. I have a tendency to do both books and their film adaptations, so those pop up a lot. So be sure to check out what I've got. I've got quite a bit of stuff already. I have a ton more planned. Most of it, oddly enough, is shot already. I did most of 2022 this past summer. I'm still finishing up fall and this December and a little bit of part of next summer, but most of it's shot and ready to go, and I'm shooting some of 2023 already. So be sure to like and subscribe. Check out what I've got. I'm adding more constantly. I'll add more education stuff. I'll add travel stuff as it comes about. Check out those on Wednesdays. Otherwise, my book reviews are on Mondays. My film stuff like this are always on Fridays, and I always have everything's already scheduled and ready to go for next year, so you'll always have something. So like and subscribe, comment if you have one. Thank you.